Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Decision Hour. I am your host, Adam Bird, and this show is all about philanthropy, business, and positivity. And I got a great guest for you guys lined up today. This guy is coming in from the other side of the world, so it's a real special treat because this guy is all over the place. He's worldwide. He specializes in influence, impact, and income. And this cat's on a mission to teach 1 million businesses. I'm going to let you guys let that sink in. He is on a mission to teach 1 million businesses how to catapult their influence, accelerate their impact, and unleash new income levels. So those of you that are just tuning in right now, grab a pen, a pad of paper, and get ready to take some notes because my friend Daniel Tolson is joining us today. Daniel, how are you, brother?
Oh man, I am good. I got out of bed for this.
I appreciate
I went to sleep at 6 p.m. tonight.
Oh my goodness. Well,
I'm good. I'm fired up.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, man, for appreciate you coming on the show. So let's dive into it. Tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Well, let me tell you this one. My mum was in porn.
Right.
My dad was in porn.
Really?
And we owned a pawnbroking business. Like the one in Vegas, Pawn Stars?
Yeah.
So we had a pawnbroking business for 17 years. And we lived in the western suburbs of Sydney. And it was the most fascinating business. I remember just before I left the family business and moved on to greener pastures, a young fella came in and he had a video camera. He said, "Hey, man," he goes, "would you lend me some money on this video camera?" I said, "Yeah, how much?" He's like, $100. And I said, "Okay, let me take a look at it." So I opened it up and, video cameras back then had a viewfinder on the side. Right. So I opened up the viewfinder and my eyes must have just gone boom and exploded when I pressed play. And I looked at it and he goes, "Is it working?" I said, "Yeah, this is definitely working." My brother says, "The camera working?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "How much do you want?" I said, $100. And he goes, "Yep." I said, "Deal done." Anyway, he went out the street and I said to my brother, I said, "Look at an absolute fucking ripper here." He said, "What is it?" I said, "Press play." And about 10 minutes later, this guy comes back in and his face is red like a tomato. And he said, I think I might have left a tape in there. And his girlfriend's standing at the front door with her arms crossed. And I said, "I think you did."
Got a sneak peek of a little more than you bargained for, huh?
Yeah, worth $100.
Yeah. Oh my God! Oh God, that is awesome. That is awesome. So you go from the pawn business, and so my first question right off the bat is real quick, those of you that are listening, go to Daniel's got an awesome website. Go check it out. It's Daniel Tolson, TOLSON.com. So if you're listening to the show, it means you're already on the internet. Just open up another browser and you can scroll through as you're listening to the show. Daniel, what got you started in the business? What from the pawn business into what you're doing now? What was that transition like? Where did that decision come from? Like, that's just kind of opposite from what you're doing now. So to walk us through that decision in getting into the business that you're in.
To get to that decision, I think probably things we've got to go back to the past, even further back.
Okay.
So let's say age 11, I've been diagnosed with linear sequential learning disability. And I was in remedial therapy for 5 years.
Okay.
Now, I used to get these bleeding noses. My nose would just start to bleed, and my parents are trying to figure out what's going on with me. And so at that time, I was also doing a part-time job, and I was a paper boy. And one day I left my paper round. I got my little cart back to the news agency. My uncle, who was my boss, gave me my money, and I went out and I was making a donation to charity. And my mum saw me, and she said, "Daniel, what are you doing?" And I thought, oh, gee, I'm in trouble because I had $1 and I gave half of it away to the charity. She said, "What are you doing giving half your money away?" And I said, "I just like to help people." So in terms of decisions, and I love that because I talk a lot about limiting decisions in the work that I do, whenever there's a decision, there's an event that follows.
Right.
And then there's a series of beliefs that hold the decision in place.
Yeah.
So I knew at a young age, 11, that I wanted to help people. And so at age 16, I then started coaching the sport of wakeboarding. And I remember I wasn't the best rider. There was people who were better than me. I had a lot of fears, and so I didn't really get as far as a lot of other people at the start. And people would come to me and they'd say, "Hey, Danny, can you teach me how to do this trick?" And I said, "Well, what trick do you want to learn?" And they'd say, "I want to do like a backflip." And I'd go, "Well, here are the 3 steps." Then they go, "I want to do a front flip." And I'm like, "Well, do these 5 things." And so at age 16, I was interviewed by a water skis magazine. And they asked me a series of questions. What are your goals? What do you want to do with your life? What's your special talent? And I didn't know how to answer that. And my brother said, "He's a good coach." So at 16, I'm already coaching water sports, people older than me, people better than me, and these people are becoming Australian champions and world champions. And I had this gift of being able to see something and break it down. And so I travelled around the country. I ended up travelling around the world doing that. So after working in the pawnbroking business, I went to Dubai and I was coaching locals and expatriates how to wakeboard. And so these are a couple of the decisions that were in place.
And this started at a young age. You said you started this at 16.
16.
I mean, that's so profound. Like you think in today's age. I mean, I'm a little seasoned, so it's like you look at, our era. And you look at today's kids, like how many 16-year-olds do you know that you meet now that have that mentality or the maturity to do something like that? That's so. I think now, my son's 19, and I was very blessed to have him be at a point where he figured out at a young age what he wants to do. He's doing that, and everybody's like, you don't see that, you know what I mean? So my hat's off to you. I think that's absolutely amazing. So how many years did you do that then? So you started at 16. How far did that go?
It was always 80% informal. Yeah. So I was an athlete myself, and I would ride with my crew. So we had our crew and would ride. My brother was an Australian champion wakeboarder. My 2 best mates, my 2 best men at my wedding were Australian champion wakeboarders. I was an Australian champion wakeboarder. And we just hang around in this little bubble of champions, athletes, the best in the game. And then when we would travel, so 21, I'm travelling over to the United Kingdom, coaching water sports over there in 2002. Then I'm over in America, up in North Carolina, Raleigh, Durham, up there chewing dip, chewing the Kodiak. On the Levi Garrett, I got my lingo there. Chewing tobacco up there, coaching water sports there. And then coming back to Australia, travelling across the country, doing my sports and coaching water sports, and then eventually ending up back in the United Arab Emirates and coaching over there. So it really took me around the world, many different places, and just that beautiful bubble of people who were becoming successful, people who were just the best of the best, world champions, elite. Crazy.
Now, so here's a question. Do you still wakeboard now in your leisure time?
No. Well, here in Taiwan, we're on an island, 377 kilometres long, but when you're here in Asia, you realise that most Taiwanese and most Asians really don't like the water. And so here we have a month of the year, and it's called Ghost Month. And in Ghost Month, this is when the portal between Earth and the spiritual world opens up. And all the ghosts hang out at the beach. And so if you swim in wintertime, during this ghost month, which is normally around wintertime, you might get taken away to the other side of the cosmos.
No kidding.
And so there's a lot of fear around the water here. So really the sport here is not set up like it is, say, in America. The mecca for wakeboarding is Florida. And so here they don't tend to do it, but as soon as I'm in Dubai, straight back on the water, wake surfing. Love it.
Wow. That is amazing. I just learned something there. I've never heard of the Ghost Month. That's very, very interesting.
Well, if you hadn't heard of Ghost Month, today is called Big Cold. That's what it is. It translates into English called Big Cold. So here on the Luton calendar, so we follow the calendar of the moon.
Okay.
Very different to the Christian and Catholic way of having the European calendar.
Right.
We have a lunar calendar. So today's called Big Cold. And on Big Cold, it's always the coldest day of the year. So I went out today and it's bloody cold. And I said, gee, wife, it's so cold. She goes, yeah, it's big cold today. And then you have this big hot day. And big hot day is the hottest day of the year. Then you have the change of the seasons. And it's so accurate, the weather predicting system here. So big cold.
That big cold. All right, I wrote that down. I got to research that some more. That's mind blowing.
All these crazy things here, living in Asia, it's like a little Disneyland for me. Every couple of days. This is a good one. I play this game with my daughter on the way to school. I walk her to school every day and we just talk the whole way. So she looks Aussie, she sounds Aussie, but she's lived in Taiwan her whole life. So she's got perfect Taiwanese and Chinese language. But then she's got this real Aussie, smart, aleck, quick-whipped, sharp-tongue attitude about her. And I'll walk down the street with her and I say, hey, sweetie, I say, I want you to translate this word for me. So I'll say, translate kangaroo. And she goes, oh, that's an easy one. She says, pouch rat. So what? She says, pouch rat. So when you look at the Chinese symbol for kangaroo, it's pouch rat. So a kangaroo has a pouch on the front,
right,
and his blood is like a giant rat. And so here they call it a pouch rat. There's stuff that you're never going to hear anywhere else in the world. Pouch rat. Like if I took that back to Australia, they'd be making T-shirts. Come and check out our pouch rat. Now, something other fascinating, and I think this is a good thing for our audience, is when we look at the Australian coat of arms.
Right.
So we have a coat of arms in Australia. On one side of the shield, we have a kangaroo, a pouch rat, and then we have an emu on the other side. Right. And the interesting thing about these two animals is that these are, I think, two of the only animals on the planet that can't walk backwards. So a kangaroo can't move backwards, and an emu can't walk backwards. So what that symbolises in Australia is a nation moving forward. So this is the symbol of Australia, a nation moving forward. And there it is, the pouch rat on our coat of arms.
How are now? You said, I know you're not in Australia right now. You're in
Taiwan.
Taiwan, thank you. And have you since? How is that? Have you been back to Australia since the last couple of years? Everything's been kind of hectic. Just put it that way. And whether it doesn't, I mean, whether you agree, disagree with it, doesn't matter. But Australia seems to be in the news a lot because of things that have happened down there. Have you been down there? Have you seen firsthand any types of effect of that in what you do?
I haven't been back since 2019, end of 2019. So this craziness kicked off in 2020. So I haven't been home. Here in Taiwan, we are a very communal society. Yeah. And it's a matriarchal society. So think about the elephants. It's led by a female. It's a matriarchal society. So here, I'm not saying that we're elephants, by the way. I'm just saying we're a matriarchal society and we have a female president. And when she says jump, we say how high. So attacking COVID is communal. So imagine this. We have 11 cases here in the country. 11.
But that, I mean, you guys don't, I mean, you're on an island, so you're not necessarily growing outwards. You guys grow upwards. Right? So and there's a lot of people there, if I'm not mistaken.
Huge. It's 23 million people.
Yeah, I was going to say. And you got 11 cases.
The population density, if you're in a suburban area, this is kilometres, it's, suburban area can be through 600 people head of people per square kilometre. Here in Taipei, it's 25,000 head per square kilometre. Where I am, it's 14,000 head per square kilometre. I live there's a complex here, there's 6 towers in my complex, 15 stories high, 4 apartments on each level, 320-something apartments here. So the population density is massive, but we have 11 cases on the island.
That's it.
11 local cases.
That's mind blowing. It's very telling.
So that's what we have here. So 11 cases, they shut down the schools, they locked down the borders. And so coming back to the question about Australia, Australia's out of control. It's out of control. I've got friends who have been locked down for 500 days. They opened the borders and they're getting something like 55,000 cases a day in Melbourne. However, they can't get enough of the rat tests, so they can't test. So it's just spreading like wildfire there at the moment. The southern parts in Melbourne, New South Wales, Queensland, it's out of control right now. They had curbed it, but I think people are flaunting this newfound independence since they've opened the borders up, and they're having these super spreader parties. So they're going to festivals, nightclubs, bars, and it's just spreading really fast. They're not wearing masks. They don't have access to tests. My friend sent me a video the other day. There must have been a mile-long lineup to get a test, but people are lining up for 7 hours, and then they get to their turn, they say, sorry, we've got no tests.
Oh,
nothing. Go home. So I think they're doing the best they can under the situation, but very different to what I'm experiencing here. 11 cases locally.
It's unreal.
And whether Australia is the same population.
All right, Dan,
as Taiwan.
I want to get back onto your business stuff here. I'm looking at your website, and you really are. I mean, you are recognized across the globe, worldwide. And you've been coaching really since you were 16, when you started with the wakeboarding and stuff. So talk about the transition from the wakeboarding, and I want to talk about where this mission comes into. You want to help 1 million businesses catapult their influence. And on your website, it says accelerate their impact and unleash new income levels. Tell us what that transition is. How did you wake up one morning and you say, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to help 1 million businesses. I'm going to start today. And then you just, boom. Like, what was your mindset there? What prompted that? And what was the atmosphere like? And how did you get started on it?
Well, it was all a drama. It was all a drama. I was in the Middle East. I'd just taken this job coaching wakeboarding, and I'd become a local celebrity there. I was on the television, in the magazines, on the radio, and I was having a great time. Having the time of my life. I was 27. And then one day I'm trying to access my internet banking. Bomb, bomb, bomb. Invalid password, bomb, bomb, bomb. Can't access it. Try to ring my business partner. Doesn't answer the phone calls. Doesn't reply to text messages. Doesn't answer the emails. I ring the accountant. I'm sorry, I don't work for you anymore. Shit. And whilst I was in the Middle East, I lost my business. And it was bad decisions. It was not having agreements in place. It was not being vigilant, not understanding about the business process, and losing everything that I've been working towards for years. So I finished my contract. I went home to Australia, went home, tried to deal with the situation, no resolution, and I thought, that's it. So I left working for the family business. I went back to the Middle East, got another job. That didn't work out. Came back to Australia Christmas time in 2007 and tried to get a job. But now I'm 27 and a half and I've got no certification. I got no university degree. I dropped out of school at 17 because I had learning disabilities. Never finished school. And so I'm a 27-year-old child and I can't get a job. So I'm looking around and I asked my mates, they were concreters. I said, hey, can I come and do some labouring for you? Yeah, okay, come and do some labouring. Another mate, he was a chippy, went and did some builder's labouring for him. And then I got a job controlling traffic. So in Australia, we call it a lollipop man. You stand there with a stop slow sign and you direct traffic with the lollipop. And that was my life. Now, I was working, that's credible. But that's what I was doing. That was my life. I'm controlling traffic. Like, come on, you got red lights and green lights. It can do it automatically, but I'm here on a lollipop. And I was so embarrassed. I used to wear this big, broad brim hat. I'd pull it down over my face so nobody could see me. I'd wear these big glasses so nobody would recognize me. And I just was ashamed because I thought, is this what life's about? Is this what my life's going to be? It's taken me 27 years to get here, and this is how bad it is now. And that was my moment. I just was like, well, fuck this. This is ridiculous. And now you start to talk to God and you start to look at the heavens. And you're like, is this what I came here for? Seriously? And that was my life. And I got really fed up, seeing other people driving nice cars and I'm holding the lollipop. People going to work during normal business hours and I'm holding the lollipop. There's people smoking ice on the job site. There's people doing drugs on the job site. And I just felt lonely. It was like I was being abandoned by the world. I'm like, oh, fuck this. And I just made a decision that day. It was the time of the decision. I said, screw this. I'm going to turn my life around. I've got to reinvent myself. I said, because if history keeps repeating itself and I've got to here, I can't get any further based on who I am. I'm going to have to reinvent myself. So I left the hometown. I left the homeland and I ended up driving over Sydney Harbour Bridge. And I looked up and I saw this beautiful big white building and on top of it said Emirates. And it was like God had just planted that sign there. I'd been driving over the Harbour Bridge most of my life and I'd never seen that sign Emirates. I'd had an ex-girlfriend who was cabin crew with Emirates. I'd been in Dubai and I went, you know what? Maybe I'm supposed to be in Dubai. So I quickly went down to the news agency, bought a newspaper, and they said Emirates Airline is recruiting. I called them up, submitted my CV, went to the interviews, and hey, I interview really well. I'm a personable guy. And they bought into my personality. They didn't ask about certifications. They didn't ask, do you have a high school certificate? Have you been to college? Do you have a university degree? They were looking for people with charisma and charm. And I charmed the pants off them. And I got the job. And they rang up and said, congratulations, you've got the job. Can you come over in 6 weeks? I said, no, that doesn't suit me. How about 2 weeks? And they said, rightio, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And I went to Dubai and I had to reinvent myself. Still reinventing myself. I got a job as cabin crew. I travelled the world. I'd had learning disabilities in the past, but I said to myself, I've got to reinvent myself. So I went on this mission and I found a gentleman by the name of Edward de Bono. Now, he's a great author. I remember learning about his educational ideas when I was younger, when I had my learning disabilities. And I went on a mission and I read all of 76 books he'd ever written. And I'd go from Dubai to Singapore. I'd buy a bag of secondhand books and then I'd take them around the world and I'd read them and I'd study this. And so I started studying psychology, behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapies. I started to study leadership. And for that next 4 years, I just put my head down, my tail up, and I got busy reinventing myself. I went to every single course I could do. I applied for every internal position I could. I worked in critical incident stress management. I worked in peer support. I took all these programs. I used to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning and do a life coaching program in Boulder, Colorado. And I did that every week for 6 months. And I just had to reinvent myself because that pain was so great. I knew that if I slipped back, I'd be going back to the lollipop. But I wasn't doing that. So that's how it really kicked off in the Middle East.
There's like, I'm at awe right now because I'm trying to figure out how to word the next question that I have for you. And you've brought up a couple of times today about you've had learning disabilities in the past. And from a personal standpoint, that really resonates with me on a personal level because I had that growing up. I was held back for grade because of my reading and comprehension, and I still have trouble with it today. And for the longest time, I thought that disability made me who I was. I let that get to me. It was very embarrassing, and I'm in my relatively early 40s still. But it wasn't until about 5 years ago where I realized, okay, how do I combat that? Like, I can't sit and read books physically, not for long periods of time. I might be able to get through like 3 or 4 pages, and then I'm in never or whatever, trying to stay focused. Audiobooks work for me. So now anytime I try to find something, I see if it has an audiobook. It just works better for me. And as much as I travel and whatnot, I comprehend it easy listening to it or have somebody reading to me. Is that kind of the same thing that you experienced growing up?
For me, I had a weird one. And maybe this will give you a little one of those awestruck moments again. And it was weird for me too. So at age 11, I collapsed, came home, bag of bones, collapsed on the floor. And my mum's like, I think there's something wrong. Now, I'd had non-stop allergies. My bronchial tubes had collapsed, so I couldn't breathe properly. I would run and my legs would collapse, a little bit like Forrest Gump. And so they knew there was a couple of things wrong. And then they started to have a deep look. So at age 11, I've collapsed, and they start to do x-rays. I've got a twisted spine. My hips are out of alignment, and my hips did not get good till this year. It's taken me 41 years to figure out and get my hips right. So I've always had that hip pain. Also, the neck was twisted, and then the platelets in the skull were pushing down on top of the left and right hemispheres. Okay. And so I had been having a migraine headache, which was causing the nosebleeds for years. And it was because the platelets were pushing down the brain. So when I was in class, although I had perfect 20/20 vision, I had a visual impairment. So there was so much pressure in the brain that I actually couldn't see properly. So one eye is kind of picking up information over here. It's bringing it through, but it's all getting jumbled up inside the mind. The right eye is kind of looking over here, bringing in different information. So if I was reading lines on a page, I'd be getting information over here on the left, and then the right eye might be picking up some information down the right-hand side. I'd get all the words right, but it was all jumbled up. So I'd try to transfer information from the board into my book, and then I'd read it out, and people would be pissing themselves laughing, like thinking I'm on drugs. I had said all the right words, they just made no sense. So 5 years of remedial therapy. And they used to take me into a room, and one, they'd have to massage the skull and realign the cranium. It's invisible. You can't see it from where you are. Nobody can see it because the pressure's internal. So they had to fix that. I used to go to an optometrist, and they would put a tennis ball on the ceiling and drop it down and sit it in front of me, and they'd hit it. And I'd have to sit there and just with my eyes watch the tennis ball go around the room. But the worst one was I had to go down to a place called Strathfield. And this was where they'd put the real special kids. And they would sit me down. I'm 11 or 12 at this stage. They'd give me a big piece of butcher's paper and some crayons. And I had to draw figure eights on a piece of paper. And I'd do it with my right hand, this big figure eight. And then the left hand, I'd do this big figure eight. And so essentially they're trying to synchronize both left and right hemispheres of the brain. So I had to do that. 12-year-old kid drawn number 8 with crayons. And then I'd have to go to all the catch-up classes. And the funniest one was, I look back on it now, they took me out of class and they put me into a room called the Space Lab. And the Space Lab was for all the special kids. And I thought maybe special meant like I was going to be an astronaut. Maybe I'm really special. But it was kids who were off the fucking planet. So I go to this fucking Space Lab. So it was it was so weird because, you know, I looked so normal. You'd throw a ball to me and I couldn't catch it, but if you put it in my hand and I ran, you couldn't keep up with me. But then my knee would just collapse out of nowhere, just like fall over. And so we got that sorted out. And then just as I kind of started to pick up the pace, and I really like what you said about reading there. I think for me, they were just trying to teach me the wrong stuff. You know, you put a book in front of me and I'm not interested, I'm not going to read it. Right. However, what I've developed, and I'm a self-taught speed reader, I can read a book cover to cover in about 90 minutes. So over the past, say maybe 10, 15 years now, I've read more than 1,000 books. I can read 100 books in a year, as long as they turn me on. Right. And if it doesn't turn me on, I won't even touch it. Right. So I think with what I teach my clients is, you've got to learn about your own learning style. You've got to learn what's important to you. And if you pick up a book and it's not for you, put it down and don't feel ashamed about it. Go and find something that turns you on. And then there's 4 types of learners. There's visual learners. There's people who learn by seeing things. That's one learning style. There's also auditory people like you. Obviously, that's why you do a podcast. You like to talk. Yeah. You probably don't want to sit down and write a book. Oh. But you could probably transcribe a book if you wanted to.
Yes.
And then you get the kinesthetic learners. They like to learn by step-by-step process. These are the kids at school who were great in the techniques workshop. They were great with woodwork and metalwork, things with the hand. And then you have people who are more AD and they just love to research. And the school system doesn't cater for all learning styles. A teacher can't sit down and say, hey, Adam, you're auditory. Well, let me read all these books for you. Right. we can't do that.
Right.
And so we've got to figure this out as we go along. But for me, I started to learn about this at age 21. I'm like, hey, I think my teachers probably had more disabilities than me. That's what I come to the conclusion. I might not have been learning disabled. I think they were teaching disabled.
Right. It's funny you said that. I was a high school teacher for a few years down in Arizona. And it was fascinating because for years and years I said, I'm not doing it. A friend of mine talked me into doing it. And I was like, all right, fine. I got sick of the school asking me to do it, so I gave in. And when I got there, I was surprised at how disconnected the teachers and the students. First thing you have to do as a teacher, and this is my opinion, I've said this before, I know this is not a popular statement, but I'm going to say it again. As an educator, as a teacher, your job is to listen to the students. You're there to teach and help them get to the next step. If you're taking education and just being a teacher as a job, you shouldn't be. That's my opinion. You have to. It's a passion. It really is a labor of love being an educator, and you have to be able to listen. I was a part-time. I was a substitute teacher. I worked 2-3 days a week at several different high schools. In every school that I went to, I had more respect from the kids than most teachers that had been there for 10, 12 years. All because I would sit and I would listen. I ruled with like an iron fist for the first few hours. But then around lunchtime and the rest of the day, I would open it up and I would communicate with the kids. And I wanted to hear what was going on in their lives. And when you did that and then offered feedback, grades went up. They weren't late for class anymore. Attitudes started changing for the better, and it was this process. And at my second year doing it, I got asked by the district to come in and kind of do what they call a train the trainer. I got asked to teach the other teachers that have been teaching full time for far more years than I've ever done. And they asked me, this part-time guy, to come in to teach these teachers how they can communicate. And one of the teachers said, why are we listening to a sub? And I'm a very blunt person. And I said, because you're not doing your job. And that was it. Everybody was quiet. They gave me an hour. I said, I need 20 minutes. I said, in 20 minutes, I'll teach all. There was 15 teachers in this class. I said, you give me 20 minutes, I'll change your I'll change your outlook on your career. You'll either want to stay a teacher and you'll change, or you'll do everybody a favor and you'll go find something else. And that was it. And they were like, well, that's kind of harsh. Well, I'm not going to sell you the hooker with the heart of gold. It was like, you're teaching our future, so let's take that a little seriously. Anyway, off on tangent. But I agree. Education is a big thing. I love the fact that you said there's different ways of learning, and Danny, you've done so much, and you have such an awesome story. And I appreciate the time that you've spent with us thus far. I wanna go into just a few more questions before I let you go. You have some statistics here on your website that are very mind-blowing. It's under the title, The Harsh Reality of Business. 3% of business people have defined goals. 3%. I really thought that number would have been a lot higher. 50% of working hours are wasted daily. Let's see. 71% of critical business decisions are wrong. I'll get to that one in a second because that one kind of hurts just reading that out loud. 98% of your potential goes unfulfilled. That's depressing. And let me tell you why. Because as a business owner myself, I see that and I immediately start questioning everything that I've done in the last 5 years. You take these numbers, explain how you, for people that are listening right now, business owners that are going to look at your website, going potentially to to work with you, to contact you, what would you tell a business owner that's listening right now why they should get in touch with you?
No goals, no future. Goal setting is about your future. And I don't know if you know this, but you're going to spend the rest of your life in your future. And if you have nothing to live for, which are your goals, you're dead. You're walking dead. And it is a harsh reality. They did these studies at Harvard. This is where they come up with the numbers. 3% of the adult population don't have clear set goals and the attainment, let's just call it, for their future. And so if you have nothing to work towards, you can't start to unleash your potential. See, somebody like Einstein, they said he used as little as 10% of his potential. The experts tell us that most people only ever tap into about 2% of their potential. See, what you and I are made of, our DNA, if you took this DNA and you stretched it out, it would reach to the sun and back 300 times. And that's what happened to me. I was on the job site. I knew this. I had learned those numbers when I was 19. I knew the numbers back when I was 19. And I thought to myself, if I'm made of this stuff, if I'm here for greatness and I am controlling traffic, this is not greatness. This is not me getting the most out of me. And so the DNA, what we're made out of, our ability to think, decide, and act, we can think an unlimited range of thoughts. We have 10 to the 10 to the 10 to the 1 neurological connections. So what that means is it's like the number 10 followed by 10 pages of zeros. We can make these connections inside of our mind for original thought. But my only thought was, how can I control this traffic and get paid this week? And repeat the cycle. And so we've got to find out what we're made of. So I went on this mission and I said, I've got to figure this out. And I really have started to figure it out. And I came across different types of sciences. So I have more than 6,500 case studies, scientific reports into the way that people think, feel, and act, on how they decide, make decisions, take actions. I understand how people face different fears. So you think about this. If you set a goal, you've got to move towards that goal.
Right.
But how do you solve problems and challenges? If you don't know how you solve problems and challenges, how can you effectively move towards your goal? On the way to that goal, in business, you've got to start to influence people and contacts. If you can't deal with people, you can't make a sale. So all of us interact with people differently. I'm confident, and a lot of people mistake my confidence for being an extrovert. I'm an introvert. I'm just very confident at being an introvert. And so I have to be able to understand how do I influence people and contacts to get them to buy into my movement, how to get them to work with me. You and I have to deal with the pace and the consistency of the environment. And if you put yourself in an environment that doesn't suit you, you will never get the optimal performance out of yourself. It's like I say to my friends, you're a bad driver. And if I bought you a Ferrari, you're going to still be a bad driver, but with a really nice, expensive Ferrari. The Ferrari's not going to make you any better. And then all of us have to follow procedures and constraints. I'm a rule breaker. I hate rules. I love to break the rules. But I know that about myself. For the people who don't understand that, they end up taking the wrong jobs. And then what happens is they limit their potential. So we've got to understand our behaviours. With all of that comes our fears. There's 4 fears that all of us have to overcome. First, it's the fear of being taken advantage of. You might have a goal to build $1 million business, but if you don't deal with your fear of being taken advantage of, you'll never successfully employ. You'll never successfully delegate work to other people. You'll feel that even if you get a high performer in the business, they're going to steal your ideas and set up shop across the street. Right. You could have that fear and you'll fail. If you fear rejection and criticism, you're never going to share your story like we're doing now. You're never going to tell people that your mum was in porn. They might look down on you. Thirdly, we've got to move out of our comfort zone. And our body is designed for homeostasis. It's the comfort zone. Our temperature, we'll just call it 36.5 degrees. If the body temperature goes up by 10%, you start to cook and you go into a hyperprexic state. What do? You bring yourself back down to the comfort zone. If your temperature drops, you go into a state of hypothermia. What do? You bring your temperature back up to 36.5 and you get back into the comfort zone. So most people get stuck in a comfort zone their whole life and they never try something outside of the comfort zone. So if you fear losing your stability, and especially financial stability, you'll never play big. You'll think you're playing poker and you'll think you're calling all chips in. I'm all in! Bro, it's $1. Put the 100,000 on the table. And then finally, what really holds most people back, and this is the emotional intelligence component, they're so afraid of trying and failing. They're afraid of trying and failing and making a mistake, and they become perfectionists. And these people say, Adam, I'm going to do it 110%. You hear these other people, I'm in 1,000%. No, I'm in 80%. And I'll tell you why. Because all perfectionists have to get everything 100% right before they begin. Yeah. And what happens is they never start. So the reality in business is 70%, 71% of the business decisions you make will turn out to be wrong. But you can break the bank. You can break Wall Street if you just make 51% good decisions. Right. So people are so afraid to try and fail that they don't even begin. And so we've got to understand these fears within ourselves. And that's what really caps our potential. They're the things that hold us back.
I really hope those of you that are listening are taking notes right now, because he just dropped a whole bunch of golden nuggets for you guys right now. Daniel Tolson. .com. If you're listening to this, open up another browser. DanielTolson.com. Daniel, we're coming up on time. And I'm going to have you back on the show because there's a lot more that I want to cover with you. And there's such good synergy here. And I absolutely love this. I'm going to ask you, you've given quite a few decision hours already, but I'm gonna ask again just to see if there's another one that you want to give us. Your feet are on the line right now. Clock's ticking. You got to make that decision. What is it, and what's the atmosphere like?
Fear. The fear comes up, and the fear is going to come up for between 4 and 30 seconds. And before you have an emotional hijacking, you've got to get clarity of your mind. You've got to take control of those emotions, and you've got to get back to an emotionally clear state. And only once you're in that emotionally clear state should you decide what is right or wrong for you. And if you've got to make a decision, always move towards your biggest fear. You're a military man, you always move towards the biggest enemy. That's what you do.
I love it. Daniel, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Anytime. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Folks, that's all the time that we have today. Daniel Tolson, check him out. His website, danieltolson.com. If you're a business owner, I don't know what's taking you so long. You should probably be sending him an email right now. danieltolson.com. Before we let you go, make sure you go check out Heroes Media Group, our parent company. Go check out all the shows, audiobooks, and all the cool stuff that they're doing this year over there at heroesmediagroup.com. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.